It's the Fellowship of the Geek Show, a weekly podcast about comics, the comic book industry, and other geek pop culture. Music courtesy of Manny the Martyr. And now, on with the show! Hey there, everybody. It's the Fellowship of the Geeks podcast. My name is Thomas Schick, and joining me for this episode is Mike Marlowe.
Hi, gang.
Les Webster.
Hello, all.
And Les Newman.
Hello, everybody.
How are you guys doing?
Peachy keen.
Fantastic.
Stuffed.
Alrighty then. Hope everybody out there is doing alright. So what's been going on in your corner of the galaxy?
Oh, gosh. Well, before Liz tries to jump in like she did last week.
Words out, Liz.
We're on to
Have to be
you.
quicker.
We're on to you. But I had actually finally started watching TV again after watching a ridiculous number of movies in October. I had to take a break for a little bit. And so I started warming up with some documentaries. The one that's probably the most worth talking about is Doomed, the untold story of Roger Corman's The Fantastic Four.
Oh, I want to see that one so bad.
Oh, it's good.
Isn't it fun?
Wow. I was impressed at how kind of sad it was. I mean, and admittedly, this was done in 2015, so this is 20 years later. And most of these folks have had careers since then. But man, they were really upset by this apparently, and the mood swung from like really depressed to really pissed about how that whole thing unfolded, and it's a weird story for sure. I mean, I don't know how weird it is in the movie industry. That might happen all the time for all I know, but it was an interesting story.
So you said TV, and I'm thinking, oh, cool. What TV shows does Mikey watch?
Oh no, I don't.
You don't.
I don't. I watch documentaries and I watch usually old movies, and that's it. And honestly, I can't even do that all the time.
On the weekends, I usually find some MASH marathon going on, and that's what stays on the TV. I don't know why. It's like a Saturday thing for me. But, yeah, I don't watch a lot of TV here lately either.
Yeah, see, I have to engage my brain more than that. I can't. I mean, there have been times in my life when I could just sit and watch TV for hours. They're rare. There has to be something wrong with me for that to happen. And I don't mean that as a slight on anybody. I'm not knocking anybody's TV habits. That's fine. But yeah, I have to be doing something else.
Yeah. So, and I always have to have it on as background noise. So I'm not necessarily watching it, but there's always something on. Although 90% of the time it's SpongeBob.
Yeah, see, if I do that, I end up watching it.
Yeah.
Until I get tired of it and turn it off, because I'm one of those weird people. I don't fear silence. I mean, and honestly, our society, this is deeper than I was planning on going, but our society has really managed to train itself to fear silence. I mean, so everybody's got to have some sort of background, something going on. Everybody's got to have some sort of noise happening.
Yeah.
I don't. It doesn't bother me for it to be quiet. It really doesn't. Some people, it really makes them freak out, too. But
I don't like it. Yeah. Not my ideal of fun. Well, with me, because it's never silent. Then you start hearing things, and then your mind's like, what was that? someone in the house?
Yeah, that's a different set of issues right there. But anyway.
Calls coming from inside the house.
Right, yeah.
What was that sound?
I would love to see that movie again, the original When the Stranger Calls, with Carol Kane and Charles Journey. I hadn't seen that in forever, but I remember seeing it when I was real young. Well, not early,
not really young, but yeah.
Well, I'm just like early teens, something like that. You know, some like preteen, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like one of the few films I actually got a nightmare from, and it actually took a couple of days before I actually remember having a nightmare and associated with that film. Considering how many horror movies I've seen since then, and I've not had nightmares that I recall. That's just kind of amazing.
Mm-hmm.
But then again, a lot of it, I'm watching them going, this could never happen, that kind of stuff. So,
yeah,
that kind of thing. Where when a stranger calls, that can actually, something like that can happen.
I think that's the kind of movies that freak me out more. Serial killers, not a big deal. Jason, Michael, love them to death. But like New Jack City, I know people don't consider that a horror film, but like when they busted into people's apartments and just started gunning them down, that gave me nightmares. It's things that could really happen, Yep. I mean, in the quiet little town of Garland.
Little?
Oh, yeah. Oh, and see, I think that's why I love it. It's a big town, but we have the little town mentality, But,
See,
yeah.
Like the film series The Purge. I have not watched those, but I'm been curious, but there's something about that just makes me kind of go, I don't know. Because it's literally controlled chaos.
Yeah.
If you're not familiar with the premise, is one night a year, basically all hell breaks loose. You can do whatever you want to as soon as you hit, I guess it's like sundown till the next morning. It's free for all. You can do whatever the hell you want. Yeah.
Yeah.
No laws.
No laws. And no consequences.
Yes, and there's no one to help you if you're a victim of someone else. That one kind of, that was like, well, I don't know if I want to check those out or not. It's an interesting premise, but it's just like, I don't know.
See, Rick and Morty did an episode. It might be a little tamer. They did their purge.
Might be a start. Kind of work your way into it. Yeah.
Sure. Okay. Anyway.
I've seen the first one. I haven't seen the ones after that. Sometimes an idea like that is better just once, Or
not at all. I mean,
not at all. Yeah.
Really, sometimes it's just good to know your limitations.
Right.
So.
Well, speaking of limitations, I finished the Star Wars saga. I think as far as the limitation goes, I think Anakin showed us how far people will go for love and went like 2 miles past that. It was interesting. It definitely was interesting. But I told you guys I would definitely have them watched before the show, and I did. I just wish I would have watched them all before the last show, but see, I've been watching movies and that kind of thing, basically doing that. Of course, we had the holidays, followed by a lot of shopping. I'm not even for sure where my credit card is at this point. It may be hiding from me. Or my debit card, I should say. But, yeah. Which, actually, brings one thing up. I had my bank call me the other day, and they asked me, hey, did you pay your AT&T phone bill for a couple $100? And I was like, I don't have an AT&T bill. So someone had taken our card and paid their cell phone bill on it. So I got to looking at my bank account, and there was like other charges. Like, it was weird. It was like $1 here and $1 there. I don't know if they were trying to gauge how much money I had in my bank account. I don't know, but I mean, thank God it could have been worse, but it was kind of cool though, because this is actually the third time that my bank has caught that and alerted me to it. So
Oh,
thought
cool.
that was, yeah. I mean, that could have been a big headache too, because they left it pending because it looked like a fraud charge to them. So I was like, that's pretty cool. And right now with, the holidays, and we've been buying food, and we've been buying, all different, especially with Black Friday and everything else, I wouldn't have noticed it. It's nowadays almost everybody's paperless. And I know it sounds bad, but I hardly look at that, So I don't think I would have noticed. And it's just kind of nice to know there's someone out there looking out for you,
Well, that's why you're supposed to be looking at it.
Right. And seeing it's things like this, it's like, hey, I need to be paying more attention to that, It's usually depressing to watch that kind of stuff.
Well, yeah.
Electric, who the hell is that? So.
You'll figure that one out real fast, because they turn that off.
Yeah.
They will turn that shit off.
But it was weird. This time it was Phil's card. Now, Phil's the kind of guy that he wakes up in the morning and he puts his wallet in his pocket and he doesn't take it out of his pocket till he goes to sleep at night. So it's never more than 2 feet away from him. And it was his credit card. And at first I'm thinking, well, we went out to eat and I bought these gift cards. And the lady was being kind of shady, because I'm weird about things like that with people with my card. And she was being kind of shady about it. And, even when we left, I told him, I said, well, that was just kind of shady. I don't like people to hang on to my card for that long. There was no reason for her to hang on to my card. And then the bank calls me, and it's kind of like, I wonder if she did something to my card. And Phil was like, no, actually, I think it was a gas pump. He went to help a friend out, and actually sad their house caught on fire. But he was getting gas for their generator, and he was like, it was like this little hole-in-the-wall gas station. I said, well, did you check the pump? I don't pay at the pump. Especially holiday time, people walk inside and pay for your gas, because now's the time that people are desperate and they'll get you. And we think that's what happened.
Well, yeah, I know about that. If you have to pay at the pump with your card, and I do this because I saw something on the news a while back. You make sure you use the pumps that are in view of the attendants, because if those are going to be the ones that are less likely to be affected if they're so like if they're like the middle ones instead of the ones of the outer ones. Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you do outer ones, then there's a greater chance of those being.
Compromised.
Compromised, thank you.
It's been a while, but I have like a stop and go up here by me. I don't even know if it's called stop and go anymore. But I went in one day and the ATM machine had like crime scene tape and stuff on it. And I'm like, whoa, what happened? And he was like, someone put a skimmer on it. And, I've never heard of what a skimmer is. And he went and showed me, and looking at the ATM machine, I would have never have guessed. Now, this is inside the store. I never would have guessed anything wrong with it. But then he pulls the little black piece off where your card goes in. And that's how they do it. As soon as you swipe your card, all that information goes back to them. He said some of them, they come back and collect those pieces, and they've got your information that way.
Yeah.
He says, but a lot of times once it's installed, they never touch it again. And, to me, like I said, that's kind of scary, because I didn't notice a difference. Once he took it off and showed me what the actual one looks like, if I'd never been into that store before, I wouldn't know the ATM machine's changed, So.
Yeah. I mean, it's scary. That's why you gotta be more careful, especially this time of year.
Yep. It's horrible this time of year.
And now you know.
And now you know. Yep. Street tips from Liz.
Wow. Not where I was going to go with that, but okay.
Sure.
That was me. I'm done.
All right, Les, you got any street tips?
Streetwise.
Yeah. Look both ways before you cross.
Yeah, watch out for that
Don't get the
bus.
snow.
Yeah, no kidding.
Because it backs up, too.
As far as my week, it was pretty quiet. We had the celebration the other day, but nothing big happened, so I was happy to see that.
Nobody went to jail this year?
No, thank goodness.
Woo, it's a
Got to
win.
keep my money.
It's a win.
But that's about it.
Okay. It was kind of quiet for me. I did pick up I did have a book come in that I've been waiting on. It is hardcover trade, Shazam, the World's Mightiest Mortal. This actually collects the first 18 issues of the 70s run. So this was really the first publication since the Fawcett run back in the 50s, and it was really kind of fun, kind of reading back some of these stories. Some of these stories I had not read before, but you got the names Denny O'Neil, Elliot S. Megan, E. Nelson Bridwell, C.C. Beck, Dave Cockrum, Vince Coletta, Kurt Schaffenberger, Dick Giordano, Pat Broderick. Some great names there, and it's kind of fun kind of seeing these stories again. And they actually addressed the whole thing of, hey, you've been gone for 20 years, guys. What happened? Well, we were in suspended animation. I mean, the first 2-3 pages of the first issue, they actually addressed that. I was like, okay, that's kind of cool to do that.
It's better that than explaining the legal issues.
Right. So, kind of a fun read. And, as I mentioned last week, the Mystery Science Theater 3000 channel on Twitch, which runs 24/7. So I've been kind of catching up on some of those I hadn't seen in a long, long time. And there was a rarity, and this actually happened today. There was actually one that I had to stop watching because I just couldn't watch it. It was just so horrible, and not even the riffing would help.
That's pretty bad.
That's pretty bad. And the movie was The Castle of Fu Manchu, starring Christopher Lee.
Ooh.
Oh, no.
Wow.
It was horrible. I mean, I just couldn't. I literally just closed the browser and got up and started doing something else. But the thing that made it fun, it was wrapped around by Master Ninja 1 and 2. And if you're not familiar with this was repackaged episodes of a series called The Master, which I got to locate this and watch it because I've seen Master Ninja 2. I've seen it a couple of times, and because I actually had it recorded back in the day. But I would want to see the series because it stars Lee Van Cleef.
Oh,
and
that one.
Yeah, in the early 80s, and Timothy Van Patten. And Lee Van Cleef is a master ninja, and he's training Tim to learn how to become a ninja and all that, as they're going across the country trying to locate Lee Van Cleef's daughter. It's not a good series. You can see why it got canceled. But I would love to watch it just to actually see these episodes.
See how many episodes you can stand it through.
Right.
Anyway.
But it was funny because the first quote unquote movie, which was 2 episodes basically paced together, had like Claude Akins and Demi Moore, early Demi Moore. The second one, you might remember the second one, Mike, because I'm pretty sure I showed you that one. Chris Bernard. The second episode had Lazenberry. Had oh God, I'm blanking. Monty Markham. Oh God, from the Man from U.N.C.L.E., David McCallum.
Oh wow.
The second story had all those actors in it. It wasn't a good story, but it was just kind of funny that I would love to see all these guest stars that were on this show that,
that regretted it later. Yeah.
Probably. Well, it's funny because you were watching the chat, and I remember you talking about this last week. Seeing the discussion in the chat room is half the fun. And someone mentioned and said, David McCallum went from someone mentioned Man from U.N.C.L.E., and he said, of course, because of this performance here, he got the role on CSI. Because he's on one of the CSI shows. I don't know which one was it. Is it Miami?
He was on NCIS.
Oh,
NCIS.
Okay, I'm sorry. Same difference. They came on.
Pretty much.
They came about the same time.
They're clones of each other. It's fine.
Yeah. So. And I kind of laughed. I kind of chuckled at that, but it's kind of cool seeing some of these episodes, and they don't have all of them due to licensing issues like the Gamera films. You won't see those, but which is a shame. But it's kind of I've been enjoying seeing some of this stuff, but not the Castle of Fu Manchu.
Aha!
Wow.
The limit has been reached.
So, okay, before we get into this week's discussion, I want to mention our monthly meet and gab, which is coming up on the December 14th. And if you're not familiar with what I'm talking about, it is our monthly gathering for us geeks here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. It's always the second Saturday of the month at 7 p.m. We meet at Wing City, which is located at 1456 Beltline Road in Garland, and the zip is 75044. And we generally just get together, kind of discuss about things that are going on in the world and universe, the geek universe, whatever you want to talk about. We're willing to talk about it as well, and have some great food and whatever else may be going on. So you're always welcome to come join us if you're in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And we also take donations for the charity that we're working with, Comic Book for Kids. If you have new or like new, all ages or teen books that you like to donate to the cause, which is for kids who are in hospitals or cancer centers, just kind of give them a little entertainment and kind of a diversion away from what they have to deal with on a daily basis. We'd be more than happy to take those. Or if you want some additional information of how you can contribute or buy exclusive merchandise from the charity, and of course all proceeds go to shipping the comics to all the hospitals in America and Canada, you can go to our website, www.thefellowshipofthegeeks.net, and click on the CB4K tab, and there's all the information and including links to their store. The latest thing they have is the Doctor Who 13th Doctor Holiday Special with their variant cover, which is a great looking cover. You'll see that on that page. And then links to their website and how you can help out this worthy cause. And of course, if you want more information about our monthly events, there is a events tab on our website. And you can also go to our Facebook page, and there's a Facebook event always set up for each month, and we'd love to see you there. And once again, that's going to be Saturday, December 14th at 7 p.m. All right. We kind of teased it a little bit last week, but we're kind of continuing our sci-fi movie theme that we have going right now. Let's see, December 7th, 1979, Star Trek The Motion Picture was released. I probably wouldn't, what am I trying to say here? The story of how this movie came about is probably just as interesting, if not more interesting, than the story we saw on the screen.
Ouch.
Right?
Right.
Am I wrong?
No.
Not at all.
A little backstory, if you're not familiar with this. Of course, this is the cast from the TV series from 67 to 69. The show was off, canceled in 69. Again, yeah. This third time was the charm, or something like that. Anyway, but Paramount realized that it was doing really well in reruns on syndication. And then, what was it, about 72, I believe, or so, was when the first Star Trek convention, or was it 70? I'm trying to remember, 70 or 72. Anyway, Star Trek conventions started popping up and were highly attended. And at some point, they decided, well, let's do a animated series, which lasted for 2 seasons and was well regarded, highly regarded. I liked them. Stories were pretty good. And they decided they were going to go ahead and do a second TV series. If I'm remembering correctly.
Mm-hmm.
It was going to be called Phase 2. Star Trek 2 or Star Trek Phase 2?
It was Star Trek Phase 2.
Yeah, because I've heard Star Trek 2 as well, which I'm going with that.
And I don't know if that was going to be the final title of it, but...
Probably not.
Right.
But they got as far as having the secondary cast come back, and they were concerned about Shatner in terms of money. And Nimoy didn't really want to come back because I don't think he really wanted to do another series, especially as Spock. So, they made adjustments accordingly. They're going to have, basically replacements. And the thing that kind of surprised me, because I had not heard this before, Mike, you might have, and because I didn't know until that video that I sent to y'all, and we'll put a link in our show notes, that there was going to be a 2-hour movie that was going to set up the series. Had you heard about that before, Mikey?
It's not springing to mind, but it wouldn't surprise me because that's kind of sort of what they did with the original series. So I think that was not unusual back then.
Yeah.
See, I had heard that when they decided to do the movie, they scrapped the Phase 2, and the pilot episode was actually turned into the movie. And that's why it was so long in parts, because, TV series is 30 minutes? And we have a film that's 2 hours and 16 minutes.
The original series, the episodes were an hour.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
Yeah, I mean...
But still, you brought up a valid point. It was an hour-long script that was stretched.
Right.
Which
well
I think is why we got all the visuals that we did. They had to fill in that space.
Well, I think part of it was, hey, we've got a budget, so... Plus the fact that there was the whole Star Wars phenomenon. And how visually spectacular that was. So I think part of that was involved. Oh, we can do that too.
Oh yeah, it was 100% a case of Paramount pulling in one morning and saying, okay, what do we got that we can get in production quickly to capitalize on this Star Wars thing?
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
And
we got this.
somebody was like, "Hey, we've got this Star Trek thing that we've been trying to do something with a TV show," and they were like, "Okay, convert that to a movie and get it out."
Quick.
And it was a stealth conversion. That was kind of interesting. According to that video, I was like, okay, I don't know if it really matters if it was done stealthily or not. I mean, it was done, period.
Yep. And with Leonard Nimoy not wanting to be a part of the series, they had to write him into the movie. And they said there was a lot of changes to the script during the filming of this because, they were adapting a TV show over into a movie. But Nimoy went on record to say that most of the changes they made in the script was to make Kirk look better. It was usually 9 times out of 10 for Kirk or Shatner.
And is anybody really surprised about that?
No, not at all. And to me, I also felt like Bones was just kind of, the only time that you saw him was when he would come onto the bridge to look disgusted at Jim and then walk off. He didn't really have a part other than look disgusted and walk off the bridge.
Oh, and they had this big old 10-minute sequence in the beginning of the movie to get his ass on the ship. That's all it was for, was, okay, we have to trick McCoy into beaming onto the ship, and then Kirk won't let him go. And that they go through this whole, really long sequence to do that, and then they hardly use him in the movie.
Right.
Yeah.
It was like an afterthought.
Yeah, I mean, he would just show up and look dumbfounded at the screen like everybody else on the bridge was doing, and you go, okay, fuck it, I'm out of here.
Well, and I mean, part of that is because, mostly for what his role in the original series was, he's there to yell at Spock.
Right.
Well, shit, Spock doesn't show up on the Enterprise until halfway through this monstrosity.
Right.
So you don't even need McCoy until then. I mean, he comes in with a couple of zingers between when he shows up and when Spock shows up, and that's it.
Yeah.
And then the rest of the time, yeah, sure, he barks at Spock once or twice, but the movie's not about Spock and McCoy, not by a long shot.
No, but didn't this movie kind of miss out on the dynamic that the crew had with each other?
Entirely, yes.
Entirely.
Yeah.
That's a major part of the problem.
And the deal is, the reason for that is because it's really focused on Decker and Ilia.
Yeah.
They're the stars of this movie, regardless of whose name's in the credits.
And I had forgotten that Decker was Seventh Heaven dude.
Yeah.
It's like, damn. Mm-hmm. He went on to become a priest.
Yeah, this is one of his earliest films. Yeah.
And he got on my nerves in there. The way he kept overstepping and making the calls, and I understand, he was pissed. His job was taken from him, but chain of command, dude, learn your place.
Yeah. Well, you say that, but his command was literally stolen from him.
Yeah, it was. But it happened. Starfleet Command put their foot down, and
no, it wasn't even Starfleet Command.
No,
it was Kirk.
It really wasn't. It was just Kirk.
Kirk.
Well, in Liz's defense, Kirk was Starfleet Command at the time.
Right.
He was the guy in charge, and yes, he came in and he had handed the thing to Decker in the first place. He had handed the Enterprise over to him, and then by the time they got it almost refitted, obviously, because you spend 20 minutes of the movie on that too.
Yeah.
Yeah, then he comes in and snatches it away. The first opportunity he had, the first excuse he gets,
right,
to steal it back, he steals it back. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Kirk is not. It's funny that Nimoy says that most of the scrap most of the changes were made to make Kirk and Shatner look good, but Kirk doesn't look particularly good in this movie anyway.
No.
He's kind of a dick.
Well, his hair did. Man, his sideburns were on point, literally.
Yeah, his hair.
He was fleek.
Wow. Wow. I can't argue with it, but wow.
And I wasn't crazy about the change of uniforms either. To me, they were really like drab compared to the colors and stuff that they had before. So it's kind of like,
Yeah,
The
and
color,
I think they actually probably stole that from the Phase 2 stuff too. I think they were
they,
probably
I think they
it was
did.
probably like a logical extension from there. But yeah.
They said they recycled a lot of props and stuff from there. But that was one thing I saw. Let me see if I can find that again. They said that one of the hardest things to do on this film was all of the sets and props and that kind of thing. And that the hardest prop or set to make was actually the bridge. Because the bridge was supposed to look like hundreds of feet. You know, it's supposed to be a big wide open space compared to the outside. So the guy who made the sets, like angled the floors, and they used a lot of people who were 3, 4, and 5 feet tall to stand in the back and stuff to give the illusion that it was actually longer and bigger than it appeared. And I was like, well, that's
a long way
pretty
to go.
cool. Yeah. That's pretty cool. And then a lot of the, a lot of the illusions and stuff we were seeing were from paintings. And they're like, you have to think that every computer monitor that you saw, it wasn't practical to have that many. It was expensive, you know. So a lot of that was done with like lighting tricks and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So to the point where Ilea, she was blinded for a day from standing in the lights and stuff that way. I thought, wow. And they shaved her head. She was a beauty pageant queen.
Oh yeah,
and
she was a model.
Her head.
She was one of the early supermodels. And
I mean, gorgeous.
And the story goes that they like had to take out a sizable insurance policy in case her hair didn't grow back the way it was supposed to.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, because she made them do it because, yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to walk around bald. Now, she was stunning without hair. I mean, but wow. That's commitment. Not a bald cap. Homegirl shaved her hair.
It was shaved bald, yep. Whether that's her commitment or the studio's, one way or the other, but yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that was... But one other thing I have to bring in, since we're talking about shaving heads and stuff, makeup artist, the guy who was responsible for all the Klingons and that kind of thing, which absolutely beautiful. His name was Fred Phillips. Now, an interesting thing about him is, of course, he did the makeup for the whole entire Star Trek run, but he also did the whole series Outer Limits, Wizard of Oz. I mean, he's a lot of makeup work. But he went to a sci-fi convention and he watched a girl about 18 walk up to these guys who were dressed as Planet of the Apes guys. And she says, wow, you look really amazing. Can you show me how you did that? And they flat out told her, no, you're a girl. Because I always find it weird, but makeup artistry was a man's profession and they didn't share a lot of tips and tricks, you know, with females. So he watched this go down and everything else, and he walked over to her and he says, hey, come work for me. I'm working on this new movie, Star Trek. You know, I'd love to show you the ropes, and I'll show you how they did that. So he took her up underneath her wing, and she later came out to be an award-winning makeup artist, V. Nil. She's worked on the Avatar, Pirates of the Caribbean, that whole series. I mean, amazing. But she wouldn't have gotten her start unless Fred Phillips would have stepped in and, you know, been like, I don't care that you're a girl, because he worked with his daughter. So I thought that was kind of cool. She's always really played up, you know, her mentor, because, like I said, it's especially during this time, it was hard for women to get a foot in a man's world, you know, and makeup artistry was special effects. It was all done by men, you know. Mac, it was a man, you know. So that was kind of cool. But one movie that he worked on that I just kind of laughed when I looked at it, Mikey, you're familiar with it. It was Blackula. He did the makeup for that show too.
That's awesome.
So, yeah, so and an interesting thing, now before the movie, this was for the series, they were trying to get Spock's ears, iconic. And the studio had a contract outside of him for the ears. Well, when the ears came back, he was like, oh my God, these are a mess. These will never work. So he called a buddy, Charlie Charm, and he was working over MGM, and he was like, look, dude, here's the problem we're having. What can you do? These are going to be in like every shot. What can you do? So they made a mold of Spock's ears and sent it over to him, and he made the mold for Spock's ears. Now, Fred Phillips does get the credit for making the ears only because Charles made the mold for him, and he poured the molds. He poured the latex and everything else for Spock's ears.
And if Charles is working for a different studio, he might not have been allowed to get credit.
That's true.
Paramount.
Right.
So, yeah.
But he had to make, each scene that they shot, or we'll say the whole TV show, they've probably gone through about 10 sets of ears for Spock. Anytime they changed makeup, they had to replace them. Any kind of break, they had to replace them. They're like, these things were so soft because they were latex. These things were so soft that they just tore anytime you touched them, But he was the man who figured it out. And and I think he was nominated for a Saturn Award for his work on this movie. Him and his daughter, Envy.
Yeah, you talk about the Klingons back there. This was the first time they got redone.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, that was actually a big deal. People were a little weirded out by it because Klingons just they just had dark makeup on and some weird hair pieces, and that was it. But yeah, they made them look alien here, and that was a big deal.
And I think later on in, was it Star Trek: The Next Generation? With I can't remember his name. I'm blanking. The Klingon that was
Worf?
part of the crew. Worf. There you go. To see the opening shot of the movie and to see Worf, wow. I mean, they've come a long way,
Mm-hmm. Yep. And they redid him again entirely for Discovery, but yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, God, yeah. Yeah, that was a little controversial, too.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a question. It's been a while since I've seen the original. I think I've seen it, and like I said, I rewatched it for the show today. But I think normally when I sit down and watch them, I skip straight to Khan, which is the second one, right?
You're not the only one, but yeah.
Yeah.
But at the very end, spoiler alert, when Ilea and Decker touch and the world explodes. I mean, wow.
Yeah, that wasn't subtle at all, was it?
Right. But they said they saw the birth of a new species. Would that be Data later on?
No.
And no.
That was Kirk being metaphorical.
Okay.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. But that would be cool, wouldn't it? That's their baby.
Spiritually, maybe, but yeah, no, not literally. No, literally, Data was built by a weird outcast scientist type guy,
Okay.
and he was not the first attempt either.
Right.
There were several attempts before Data came up. The Next Generation goes into that a bit, and then it comes up in a little more detail in one of the later Next Gen movies.
The last one.
I think, yeah, was it Nemesis?
Yeah, that was the
Was
last
that
one.
the last one?
Yeah, because that's when we found out that Data was actually the third attempt. There was Lore, who was his immediate predecessor, and then Nemesis says there was one before that, and his name was B4.
Yeah.
B4.
B4.
So who was before Data? Before Data.
Right. Which, yeah.
Yeah.
Which,
Who's
yeah.
on first?
Exactly.
I think with the visual effects of the movie, I think they pulled off the lack of a story. And it was kind of interesting that Viger turned out to be Voyager, you know. But it was slow. Now, to tell you how slow, I
Where's
even
my
had to pick
comment
my movie
there?
up.
No. But see, the deal is, I don't disagree with her at all. Yeah, I mean, this was not, this has not been called for years Star Trek: The Motionless Picture for nothing.
Well, just to make sure it wasn't just me, I rewound to the beginning of the show. At the very beginning, there is 3 minutes, total 3 minutes of stars, nothing but stars. No words, no credits, no nothing. It's just stars. It's not until 4 minutes and 45 seconds into the movie that we see ships in these stars. And it's another 5 minutes and 53 seconds until we actually see the first character of the movie. And the credits haven't even rolled yet.
Okay, so in defense, I will defend a little bit. No, I agree. Like I said, this is one of the slowest moving movies I have ever seen.
Yeah, that's just
Now,
the beginning.
the thing you have to remember is the director of this movie. I mean, one, he was probably told to stretch it out a little bit, because, yeah, I think because they ended up rushing the script. Well, I say rushing. They ended up working on
whole
the
thing
script
was-
for like 2 years or something to get it to where they needed it to be, or a year and a half. It was a ridiculous amount of time to spend on a script, and given what they came up with, that's shocking to me. But the thing you have to remember about Bob Wise, who was the director of this movie, was that he had been around for a long time.
Mhm.
He was an Academy Award-winning director, and for me anyway, the most notable. I mean, he had been directing movies, all kinds of movies, for 40 years at this point. He was not a young man. The most notable movie, for my money, that he directed was The Day the Earth Stood Still. Also, not a particularly fast-moving movie.
No.
But given that he had been directing movies since the 40s, one of the things that was not unusual back then is that you would have what they would call the overture.
Yeah.
And so basically they would just have the theme song, kind of the main theme of the movie playing, and it would just be to a black screen for the most part. The fact that they put stars on it for this was actually a little bit clever on their part. But that's basically how they managed to pad out the opening of this movie, is by actually playing the overture. And yeah, I mean, were people used to it even by the late 70s? Probably not. It was probably out of vogue by then. But
oh yeah, it was mainly 50s and 40s, 50s, and 60s things. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you see it in the one that jumps to mind is Ben-Hur, another monstrously long movie. It's actually more like 7 minutes for that one, and so it's really ridiculously long. But that's nearly a 4-hour movie that they do that with. That it's not as weird as it seems that they did that.
Yeah, it was used a lot back in the 50s, 60s. I can think of several films that do that. But yeah, as you said, Mikey, it kind of went out of vogue until this movie, and then the movie we talk about next week. It's like that's the only time it's been done since then. So it's kind of weird, but yeah, I don't mind because it's Jerry Goldsmith music and it's awesome.
Oh, it is.
It was good.
Awesome enough that they recycled it for the next generation, which is honestly nearly 10 years later.
Right. Yeah, I mean the main theme, and then of course the Klingon theme has been used through the entire film series, or at least up until the reboot in 2009, which I don't blame them because that's an awesome piece of music.
Yep.
Yeah.
So,
Well, that's good. But like I was sitting there thinking, am I missing something?
No,
No, not at
no,
all.
overtures
It's my
were
computer
gone
screwed.
for a long, long time, and then they decided to do this for Star Trek, and then, like I said, for the film that we'll be discussing next week, and then it's gone again.
Yep. Well, and I think it sets a mood that this is clearly. I mean, as much as I mean, they obviously did it in response to Star Wars. I
Right.
mean, there's just no way to deny it. But I think they also kind of wanted to start off stating, okay, yes, this is a space movie just like Star Wars, but it's not Star Wars, and we want to prove that it's different. And so I think they took a more relaxed, an intentionally slower pace because of that. I think that was the thing they were trying to do. Was it's not always about excitement. There will be excitement, but I mean, life is not about how fast you can fly through the trenches. It's about the slow bits in between. And boy, I think they may have gone a little too far in that direction, but I think there was a certain amount of intent behind it too.
And you talked about the length of time that it took them to write the script, and then of course do all the rewrites during the filming and all that. I had heard stories that they literally finished editing and then got a roll sent to the Smithsonian for a screening that evening. Because it just took so long, because they had already set the December 7th, 1979 premiere. This is when it's going to hit your local theater, and going,
Are you
yeah,
sure?
Oh, sure,
Is it?
sure, we can make that, no problem. How the hell are we going to do this?
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the special effects had to be, they were not done quite the way that Robert Wise wanted done. The editing, similar, same thing. So, fast forward 2001, and he's given the opportunity to go back and edit the film the way he wanted to, and with the special effects technology that we had at the time, they went back and they did a lot of changes. And I just watched that version. I just watched that in preparation for today's show, and it's a night and day difference. I mean, it doesn't really help the story. It's like you said, it still kind of plods, but it does look better. It helps it a little bit, but you can only do. There's only so much you can do when there's not much.
Right.
I mean, it's literally 2 hours of them staring at the screen, going, "Okay, I don't know what this is. What the hell is this?"
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And one of the big differences was that the original was really dark in places.
Right.
I mean, it kind of makes sense because you're out in space. It's one of the things about space is it's black. It's just a whole lot of black all the time. I mean, not to go too far into random weird quotes of Red Dwarf for everybody, but yeah, I mean, it should be dark, but it was too dark in the theaters. It was the deal, and so nobody could really see anything, and so that makes a really slow movie extremely boring when there's not really even any visuals you can look at.
Right.
Yeah.
But what?
Well, I was just thinking that this thing, I don't think they ever explained what the whole mass around it was, but a cloud. This cloud was 2 days away from hitting Earth. Wouldn't it have picked up some of the light from the sun?
That depends on how fast it's moving. I mean, the idea is it's moving at warp speed. So no.
Yeah.
Not necessarily.
True. Okay.
It's a lot of light years away from the sun at the beginning of that 2 days. So by the time it drops out of warp in the solar system, sure, but
I always forget they're in warp.
Sometimes their writers did too.
Which Star Wars warp story? with Wonder Woman and Carrie. That kind of was. Speaking of warp speed, you know the part I'm talking about where she flies.
Mm,
Oh, from last
Hmm.
week, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I say speaking of warp speed.
Yeah. Speaking of being in space,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah. But most of the time when you have movies that come out, because I know they were trying to combat at this time, the Star Wars popularity, you didn't really see them take any reference from them. That's kind of what was refreshing, you know?
And whether that's a good thing or a bad thing is probably up for debate too. But yeah,
Right. But it was different than what we'd been given at that point with Star Wars.
very.
And I think even if we go into the second movie, it's still, I don't know, maybe one of you guys said it last week with Star Wars being more fantasy
Yeah, that
and
was me.
Star Trek, yeah, and Star
And
Trek being more sci-fi.
it's more
Right.
science fiction.
I mean, one of the things that Star Trek originally did was, I mean, the closest analog to a starship that we have today is a submarine. I mean, it's a ship usually intended for combat that, I mean, you can't have windows
Yeah.
because it's just water out there because what's beyond the hull of the ship is completely inhospitable. Star Trek embraced that, and honestly, with with Wrath of Khan, they really embraced it. I mean, that whole thing was this huge submarine combat scene,
Yeah.
which they had actually done in an episode of the original series too. And I always thought that was a really good one. But um, so yeah, it's a very different. It's not as flashy. It's not as showy.
Mm-mm.
It's very simple and methodical. And one of the
And there's
things
more.
that
Go ahead.
one of the things that impressed me was, like you're saying, they didn't. I mean, they had done Star Trek was long over with when Star Wars came out.
Hmm.
Um, they didn't compromise their vision. Roddenberry managed to hold on to what he intended Star Trek to be in the first place all through this whole Star Wars thing. He just kind of managed to ignore it.
Hmm.
Whereas most of the other sci-fi crap that came out in that time frame was complete and utter ripoffs
Hmm.
of Star Wars, not the least of which was a James Bond movie. In all honesty, I
Yeah.
mean, Moonraker was they what was the one before that? The Spy Who Loved Me. It's
Yes.
they at the end. Early, at some of those early Bond movies, they actually would finish the credits, the end credits, with the name of the next Bond movie.
Film. Yeah.
And For Your Eyes Only. I mean,
Yeah, for your
whoops.
eyes only.
It's The
Reference.
Spy Who Loved Me. It said James Bond will return in For Your Eyes Only. Except that that's not the next James Bond movie we got, now was it? Because Moonraker came out 2 years later instead,
Yeah.
because they rushed something that had something vaguely spacey in the title and put a space combat scene in it
Oh God.
to capitalize
Ah,
on the Star Wars craze. Yeah, even the
a space
Broccolis
comment.
weren't beyond it.
Space comment scene which just made your head ache.
Oh man, it was so
If you
painful.
thought about it.
It was so painful to watch. Because honestly, it was not that different from the fight scene they had done in Thunderball 10 years earlier,
That's
except
true.
that it was in space instead of underwater. Yeah, it was painful, but
Yeah.
Star Trek didn't do that.
They didn't.
They came back with what they had in their own sensibility. They didn't change their vision. And you kind of have to I think for the most part you have to credit Gene Roddenberry for that. I
Yeah.
mean, he did it to such an extent that they kind of bounced him from the second movie, but
Yes.
that's a
Yeah.
different issue altogether. That's because they saw what happened too, and they were like, "Oh my God, this is the most boring movie in the history of forever." Um, We need something more interesting for the next. We want to do a next one because it actually made some money. It wasn't a complete flop.
No, they did make their money back.
It just
Yeah.
and then some. But
Mhm.
yeah, they didn't make what they wanted it to make because they were looking at what Star Wars made
Yeah.
and comparing what they wanted based on that. And so based on that, yes, it failed. But honestly, it made like triple its own money back.
Yeah,
It
it
was
did.
by all other, I mean, other than it being critically panned, it made money.
Well, I think Star Wars and Star Trek are always going to be like the superhero movies. Even if it's a crappy movie, you still have that fan base that's going to go buy a ticket and they're going to sit through that crappy movie, you know?
Hmm.
So,
I did for years.
yeah, I hope in the next one, you know? But I don't know if they could ever put out a bad one. Just from the fandom alone, it would make money back, you know?
Right. I think and we have to be careful with the distinction between a bad movie and a movie that's going to make money.
Right.
Because there were some stinkers. Let's not lie.
Mhm.
Let's not lie to ourselves. I'm not.
Right.
I'm a fan, and I'm going to tell you there were some stinkers.
Yeah.
I mean, 3 wasn't great. 5 was downright terrible. And honestly, none of the Next Generation movies were all that great, in my opinion.
No. I'm hoping the Picard one is going. It looks good. It looks really good. That comes out this month, doesn't it?
January.
Next
January.
The January, yeah, the series, yeah.
And you know the trailer, he's sitting in his captain's seat and he's like, "Hello, this is Patrick." You guys don't watch SpongeBob, but there's an episode of SpongeBob where they keep calling up at the Krusty Krab and they're like, "Is this the Krusty Krab?" And they're like, "No, this is Patrick." But yeah, it was a cute meme. I'll have to see if I can find that one because Patrick was on the other line and he's like, because I think he said, "Is this the Enterprise?" And they have Patrick going, "No, this is Patrick."
Nice.
It was funny.
You know, Sir Patrick Stewart has a great sense of humor. If you
He
see
did.
it. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Once he finally loosened up on the set of the Next Generation, he did.
Oh God, have you seen that video?
Which video?
The video of Brett Spiner at one of the conventions, and he was talking about that. He was talking about the first season.
Oh, nah.
It's
been a while.
He does an impersonation. He does an impression of Patrick Stewart.
Hmm.
And it was
Isn't that the one he's gotten in trouble for?
I think he has.
He's been like, and it's not that Patrick Stewart doesn't appreciate it. It's that there was something else going on, and he's had to promise that he won't do it at certain things, certain events, because I think the deal is he's freaked people out or something. I don't know. I'd have to look it up.
I don't know. Either,
Anyway, sorry, I interrupted.
Yeah, no, that's okay. No, you're fine. It's a great impression. But he was talking about the fact that how everybody was cutting up on set because these were 12, 14-hour days, and everybody, just everybody else was just kind of, just having fun except for Patrick. He was still, kind of. I don't want to say aloof, but something like that. But there was an incident where one of the directors was like, I'm going to finish this episode and I'm going to leave. I'm not going to do any more of this. They're too rambunctious. I can't stand this and all this. So there was a meeting. I think it was Rick Bergman was just kind of talking to him about all this. And then apparently Patrick just kind of goes off on him and kind of scolding them, and that's when he does the impression. It's spot on. It's funny. But this happened to be the episode where, from what he was talking about, because he first was talking about was one other episode, but it was apparently the episode was the one where they kill off Tasha Yar because they come up with the scene of them doing the eulogy, and they're about to do that. They're about to do that scene, and I think he's like dancing on the hill, or no, he's doing the Julie Andrews. The hills are alive with the sound of music. And then just ever since then, he's the worst offender of being goofy and just a cut up and all that. He's worse than the rest of them combined after that.
For years, yeah.
For years. And I mean, this was the first season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he goes, and that's one of the last episodes of the season.
Right.
And yeah, he went through the whole, almost all the first season, just being, I mean, I don't know if he was feeling like he was better than everybody else or something. It just didn't. He didn't get it. He kind of just didn't get it.
I think
he's explained it that way before. I think he said I just didn't kind of understand the vibe. I didn't understand the show. I didn't understand what it meant. And finally, it all clicked into place for him late in that first season. And I guess he got tired of not having fun.
Yeah.
And decided, fuck it, I'm gonna have fun. And blew them all out of the water because that's just the kind of person he is. But yeah.
That's cool.
After because they switched showrunners near the end of that season too, and the new show, everybody hated the new showrunner.
Yeah.
And that was why Crosby and McFadden left. That because they were just like, no, if he's going to be in charge, I'm out. Both of them.
Yeah.
And Denise was like, kill me off. I don't want to come back ever. That showrunner ended up not lasting very long, but
yeah,
which is why Gates McFadden came back in season 3. But anyway, motion picture.
I encountered something kind of doing research I had never heard of before, and I sent Mikey a link last night, and I would really love to hear Mikey's thoughts about this. Or maybe I don't. I'm not sure now. One of the things I had read is there was a reference. What was it in it was a Star Trek encyclopedia, and then there was also someone that suggested it in a letters column for Starlog, and it kind of picked up a little steam even by Shatner in one of the books, Star Trek books he wrote, which was, I think, what was called The Return. Was that it, Mikey? Anyway, the thing is that the theory that Voyager, the machine planet that he found, was the Borg home planet. So it was basically the Borg that, some earlier version of the Borg that sit in Voyager, helped Voyager complete its mission, more or less. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, I think this is one of those cases of somebody trying to find a connection where there really isn't one, or somebody trying to build a connection to make something make sense that doesn't need to. It could just be two unrelated stories. I mean, my God, they did enough of those.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's what I've always thought of. When I heard this, I was like, okay, that's kind of interesting. It's not something I ever thought of, but,
Yeah, that ain't how I would do it.
No, I probably wouldn't do that either, because not everything has to be tied together.
Right.
Yeah.
It can be tied together by the fact that all of these adventures happen to this particular ship and this particular crew. Right. They don't have to all connect outside of the Enterprise. No. It's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's more than one machine planets in the universe, more than likely.
Right. I think there's no reason why there couldn't be. If you're going to have all these other weird alien races, you might as well have a couple of different types of machines.
Right.
I mean, that would, in my opinion, that would be like going back and rewriting Doctor Who continuity to make the Daleks related to the Cybermen. Why? Why would you do that? That's just dumb. Just don't do that. Stop doing that.
Yeah.
Doesn't have to connect. It can just be two cool stories.
Mm-hmm.
or a lot, a few cool stories and some kind of weird stories because my opinions of the Borg are, I don't know, I'm not sure why they were so popular. Didn't make sense to me.
I think some of it was just it was an actual a legit threat for the Federation, I guess. I mean, I don't know because I mean you didn't have the Klingons. The Klingons were allies now for the most part. Romulans they didn't really mess with too much, and then Ferengis really came like the thing, like the that little thing said. It kind of became a joke because they weren't all they were really into is you know materialist stuff. No, they weren't, you know.
Yeah, they were an object lesson of some sort, I
Yeah.
think, and I mean that's fine. Star Trek is actually full of those if you pay attention, but
Right.
they were they were an extreme example of something that the writers were trying to point out to people, because that's the way the original series worked too. They were always writing stuff in to kind of emphasize certain aspects of current events that were bothersome
Yeah.
or that they couldn't address otherwise. You can't
Right.
talk about Vietnam directly, so we'll come up with different ways of mixing it into the show and kind of talking about how what suggest better ways of dealing with these things. And so that's been going on forever. And I mean,
True.
I think the Ferengi were kind of that way as well.
Yeah.
They was the horrors. I mean, it was the late '80s. It was the horrors of capitalism. That sort of thing.
Right. Yeah. So, Les, what are your thoughts about the motion picture?
Personally, when it came out, I was excited because it had been quite some time. Yes, we had a touch of the Star Wars. This one gave me a basis for a movie because I knew the characters. I didn't think it dragged, personally. I thought it took the elements of the TV series and laid them out, just like the TV series would. Now, you may say they stretched it to accommodate, but who among us knew that the threat was Voyager? We knew it as V'ger, but who knew it among us as Voyager? And to me, that was somewhat of a possibility for the item to return. The thought that the Borg did this and all that, no, I'm not going to go with that. But I felt that it was a long time coming. 2 was just a push from the TV series. 3, I agree with Mike. I thought 3 was really well done. And then it just kind of obliterated. As far as the next gen, maybe the movie First Contact was viable, but I didn't have any respect in the rest of them. The points that you folks have been making have been very fascinating to me.
Fascinating.
Okay, I'm allowed one, right?
No,
okay.
yeah, totally, absolutely. I just wanted you to know that it was received.
Yes.
We got it. We're good.
No, I did think that, once again, I enjoyed it. I thought it was a fun movie, and I was around when the TV series was first announced during this summer, and I got to see the ads on television, was just so enthralled. I had the same reaction when I saw previews to the movie. And I thought, it's about damn time. And maybe I'm one of the few, but I was not disappointed at all. I thought even the love story was better written than anything George Lucas did. So I praised that.
Certainly better romantic dialogue.
Oh, hell yes.
Leah wasn't his sister?
No. She wasn't even human.
So there I stand.
I mean, I like the film. It's not one of the better ones, as Mikey's pointed out, but I like the film.
Oh, yeah.
I'll still watch it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would too. I mean,
I own it on DVD. I mean,
yeah.
I've watched it more than once. I like the movie. Yeah, I gotta be prepared for it to drag a bit, but that doesn't bother me.
Yeah.
See, now you know where to fast forward.
Oh, I figured that. Yeah, right. You just bump up to the 6-minute mark and just start the thing.
Yeah,
But yeah,
you're good.
yeah. See,
I don't want to do that because I love the music.
Right.
So.
I was gonna say I don't mind listening to the music. It's fine with me. I like it.
Yeah.
But yeah. Yeah. I mean, the deal is there are flaws, and I mean, as long as we kind of recognize that, it's fine.
Right.
Like, there are very few perfect movies out there.
Right.
Yeah.
This one was not one of them. I mean, that's fine. It's okay.
Although I will say that this was, along with Star Wars, showing how far we could go with special effects and visual effects, and because I mean most of this movie was one big visual effect, down to what the enemy or villain was,
Mm-hmm.
which to me is always amazing, especially like I said, when you look at the current offerings of the time. It takes Star Wars out of the equation, but at the other movies' current offering at the time, it was pretty high on the list for special effects and stuff.
Oh yeah, it's a big budget movie for sure.
Mm-hmm, for sure.
They dropped a ton of money on this thing.
Mm-hmm. Even by today's standards.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
Oh yeah, what, 43 million? 46, something like that?
Something like that. Yep.
I mean, that's a lot of money now to spend on a movie. They spent this back then. That's a whole lot more money than they spent on Star Wars.
Yeah. Its final production cost ballooned to approximately $46 million and earned $139 million worldwide.
Yep. Like I said,
which was better than Heaven's Gate.
Well, right, but yeah,
That wasn't.
Exactly. A lot of things were better than Heaven's Gate.
Wow, we're just out of nowhere. Heaven's Gate.
Oh no,
Okay.
it was out about the same time as this. That's the reference, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, it was. They came out about the same time.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, I liked it. Just, I'll always be part of that fandom that I'll go and sit and watch the movie.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Just because of who it is, Yep. Although I do think that now I was able to watch the series as a kid. Not when it was on, but I was able to watch the series and stuff. So when I was old enough to watch the movie, I appreciated it. But if I had not seen the TV series in '79 and I was going to go watch the movie, they really did nothing to tell you any kind of background on these people. Why the hell, Spock was on a different planet, and I think to fill some of that time that they used their effects for could have worked a little bit more to build a character. We knew who they were, but would the average moviegoer who maybe hadn't seen the series, would they have known?
I think they were banking on people having seen the series, and I think to an extent that was a reasonable assumption, because I mean, one, the series was actually pretty popular when it was on. It kept getting canceled, but that was that wasn't because it wasn't being watched. That was because there were other issues there. There were studio issues there. And then on top of that, this Star Trek was the series that made syndication a thing. It was in reruns constantly.
It was. Still is.
From the time it left the air originally in '69, it was on the air. I mean, somewhere. And so it was on the air enough, and they were making enough money from syndication from it that they could pretty well assume people had seen the series.
So did they really make it for long term then? If I was to go in there now and tell Brandon, hey, watch this movie, he'd be like, who the hell are these people? You know.
Also,
to whereas,
you failed as a parent, because why has Brandon not seen the original series?
Well, he's seen the newer ones, but, I could only do so much. But, even with movies that we've seen come from, they usually set up a little bit of the background. A little bit about maybe why Bones didn't want to get on the ship, or, like I said, like Spock was on a different planet, and why Kirk lost control of his ship. It would be just a little bit more.
Okay, do we want to go here? I'm going to throw out the warning now.
Uh-oh. Now, let's go.
All right. So, like I said, you've got a director in Robert Wise who's been around for decades at that point. Also, this is the late 70s, and so you've still got, in a sense, kind of an old school mentality about movies, and you're coming into this with a known and pretty well loved property. Combine that with the fact that the last 40 years have been a constant dumbing down of anything they can get their hands on in media. And I don't know why they would bother. I mean, the only reason you would do something like that would be to either speed up the movie or to dumb it down to the point where anybody can understand it, or to where anybody can feel as comfortable as a fan would. I think the short version of this is that, yes, this movie was kind of made for the fans. It was made because of the Star Wars phenomenon, but it was made for the fans. This is a deal where Roddenberry still had his hands on it, and he was still driving the boat. And so he was neck deep in it. So he knew he was making this for the fans, not really for the studio. Even though the studio was giving him a ridiculous amount of money to do it. Right. Yeah. And then since then, you've got, I mean, in a way, it may have been, whether it was conscious or not, it may have been Roddenberry's way of saying, hey, okay, we're making this because of the Star Wars thing. But how dumb a movie was that, if you think about it? It was just constant excitement and adventure and stress.
Yeah.
With very little, I mean, if you think about A New Hope, I mean, they're having to introduce characters. And they're doing so in mostly exciting ways. I mean, we meet Han Solo and he's already on the run, and we meet Leia and they're for some reason breaking her out of prison. And why, if you're building good characters, and I'm thinking in terms of what Roddenberry's doing, why would you have to go through all of that stress to build a good character? A good character you're going to build over time, and that's what he got to do with even 3 seasons of a series.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you need to restate that now?
Yeah. See, I just think of, they had an article the other day about Doctor Strange 2. And Disney has told people, now before you see this, you're going to have to watch 2 episodes of this to understand what's going on here. Fans are losing their mind. Well, what if we don't want to watch that? And blah, blah, blah. So, people kind of, if you're watching a movie, you want to see the movie. You don't want to have to watch a lot of this other background stuff and everything else to enjoy and watch the movie.
But see, one of the things people really love about the whole MCU thing is that it's a continuous story across
Mhm.
a shitload of movies. But then they're gonna
Movies.
bitch and whine because they have to go watch TV shows for any of it to make sense. TV shows that they're probably friggin' watching anyway. I mean,
Yep.
come on.
Yep.
What difference does it make? Just do it.
Yep.
So anyway, part of the deal is the reason why the MCU has been so popular is because it's getting away from that dumbing down that I'm talking about.
Well, it's not really a dumbing down because what they've done with the MCU is kind of what Star Trek did with their TV series.
Mm-hmm.
But
Right, they've taken time to build characters out.
they did. But like I said, the first movie of Marvel, you didn't have to walk in there with any knowledge of anything other than where your seat was. You didn't have to know who Tony Stark was. You didn't have to know Iron Man. You didn't even have to know how he got the Tazarek. You didn't have to know any of that. They told you that.
That's fine.
They showed you that,
But that's
so
the first thing that you're seeing. That's the first step. That's chapter 1 of the MCU.
Right.
Star Trek the Motion Picture was not chapter 1 of the story.
For 1979.
That would be, you're looking at, I don't know, the first Avengers movie?
Yeah.
Yeah.
In terms of where the continuity lies? So you wouldn't, they didn't spell out who all the characters were in the first Avengers movie, just like you wouldn't do that in the Star Trek the Motion Picture.
Right. Listen, I like I said, as a fan, I didn't need that. But when you're making a movie, you don't really just need to think about today. Like now, how is this movie doing? 10, 20, 30, 40 years from now, you can watch the first Iron Man movie, and once again, you don't have, you see what I'm saying? Especially to find a rerun TV show to watch in order to watch a movie. So I don't feel that, I feel that yes, he did it for the fans, and that was amazing and awesome for the time, but it dated. Because now that we're 40 years ahead, people don't know who Spock was. Oh, Lord, they don't know who Spock was. That's scary. But they don't know who, Kirk was or who Bones was or, they don't know any of that now. So it's kind of would even be harder now for the newer generation to watch this because there's nothing there to...
Right, and where you're going to confuse people with shit like that is the fact that you've got something like Discovery, which is only tangentially related, really. I mean, and I admit, I have not seen any of the series. So, and I'm not really judging it, but my point is that story that the original Star Trek was telling, it's over. And it's been over for a while now. And they've told other different stories, kind of starting from there. I mean, The Next Generation was a new story kind of set in that same world.
Yeah.
It's not supposed to still be telling that same story. Yes, that story is dated because that story's over. And if you're going back to it, then you're going back to it because you love the story, not because it's something new and interesting. Because it's not. It's a 40-year-old movie, which is, like I said, in the middle of a story that...
I do a podcast with these crazy guys who like movies that are 40, 50, 60 years old.
Yeah, but we're weird. We can admit that freely.
Get away from them now.
Run!
The thing is, if you look at the MCU movie, if I went in and watched the second Avengers movie, I'd be lost.
Or even the
I
first
didn't
one.
have any of the background of Iron Man, Thor, Captain America, nothing.
Right.
So this is a continuation of the TV series, but it doesn't take a person long to figure out some of the dynamics.
Yeah.
If you're akin to the TV series, everything you see will go, well, that makes sense. I understand what they're doing. But if you go see some of the DC or Marvel movies, you can get frickin' lost quick.
Yeah.
Right. And with Star Trek, the flip side of what you're saying, the kicker of that is that once you get to once you get to Wrath of Khan, the writing is so much better in that movie that it's back to that you get the dynamic. Like, I mean, the prime example is the Kirk Spock McCoy dynamic. You get that back in 2. Which, and it's not like we were talking about earlier. What we started off with is that's not there in the first movie.
It's not.
I mean, and that's a failing of the first movie, and that's fine. The deal is it's not their movie. 2 is their movie. 2 is about Kirk and Spock and McCoy doing stuff, mainly because they've pulled from the past on that one. They're doing a direct sequel to something else, which was from the original series, which is where they wanted to come back to in the first place. And from there, it kind of goes back to that. But yeah, this movie was weird in that it was born out of a weird production hell type thing.
Yeah.
That, I mean, honestly, Phase 2 was never going to happen because it was just so. It was a little bit out there, to be honest, and it was. I mean, you're trying to build a TV series based on what the studio is viewing as an unsuccessful TV series. So why would you do that? So what's going to be different? And so they kept forcing them to change things and forcing them to change things, and finally it was pretty much unrecognizable. And then all of a sudden, they come back and say, "Okay, we need a movie, and we need it fast." And I mean, all you've really got at this point is this jumbled mess of a TV series that's probably never going to see the light of day. We'll make a movie out of that, but we need to bring back some of the old guys to do this. So you bring Kirk back, and you're like, okay, how are we going to con Nimoy into coming back, getting Spock back in here? Well, I don't know. We'll figure it out as we go. And we got to bring McCoy back because he's one of the triumvirate. I mean, he's not really going to play into the script, but they don't really know that going in. And so it ends up being this other story about these people that got created in the Phase 2 time. And so it's just, again, a jumbled mess based on what it's supposed to be, what Roddenberry wanted it to be. And yeah, it's the anomaly, though. It's the weird one. I mean, I'm trying to think of a really good. What's an MCU movie that nobody liked? Maybe the second Thor movie? It's actually probably more like that.
Yeah.
Which I honestly didn't have a problem with. I thought the second Thor movie was pretty good. But, again, I'm weird. There are a lot of people that didn't like it for whatever reason. I don't know. But.
So, any final thoughts on Star Trek: The Motion Picture?
Yeah, you should probably. Everybody should probably see it once.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go watch it.
Exactly.
Judge for yourself. I mean, like I said, most of us we're hammering it pretty hard, but we all pretty much liked it.
Yeah. And like I said, just if nothing else, the special effects and the visuals in it are pretty amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And an incredible music by Jerry Goldsmith. Once again.
Totally.
Yep.
On that note, we will take a quick break and be back with our weekly picks. And we're back. It is time for our weekly picks, and leading off is Mike.
Yep, I'm leading off, and my first pick is from Dark Horse Comics. I am picking Criminal Macabre, The Big Bleed Out, #1. I don't know about anybody else, but I am really excited that Steve Niles is putting another one of these out. I've been a big fan of Cal McDonald for a long time. He is, if you're not familiar, he is kind of sort of a private eye. I mean, although there's not really necessarily a whole lot of detective work involved, it's usually just Cal getting the crap beat out of him. But he's kind of a supernatural detective, and he's got an interesting cast of kind of well, friends is not a good word to use for that. He's got people he works with. Cal doesn't have friends. Cal's a terrible friend. Cal's kind of a terrible person, but that's all right. It's still fun to watch him get the crap beat out of him anyway. But anyway, it's been a little while since we've had one of these stories, and I'm really excited to see Steve Niles writing another one.
Mm-hmm.
It has been a while, so it's good to see this back. Definitely.
Yeah, I'm in the mood for this myself.
Yeah.
Alrighty, I am next, and for my first choice, I'm going with a new book from Image Comics titled Lucy Clare Redemption. This is written and illustrated by John Upchurch. And Lucy Clare, at one time, was a celebrated hero, but a bunch of different things happening to her. She's not highly regarded, and she's lost custody of her children. And apparently, something from her past comes back, and she has to become a hero once again and try to reclaim her children. This is kind of an interesting little premise. I did like the art from what I've seen, so this could be a pretty cool book.
It does sound cool.
Yeah, I'm curious to see where this one goes.
Yeah.
As am I.
Take kids from a mama, she turns into a mama bear. So, should be a pretty good story.
Alrighty, Les.
My first choice is 5 Years, number 6, from Abstract Studios. In this one, Terry Moore steps up and puts his female leads into precarious positions. Kachu has disappeared because of a political star promoting the bomb, which was discussed last week for the issuance of the first trade. Francine leaves the kids with her mother to find where Kachu is, and finds out that she is in a vicious cycle with the social life of the political elite. So now it's coming down to a do or die situation, and I'm definitely on board with this.
Yep.
Yep, I like this story.
Mm-hmm.
Alrighty, Liz.
All right. For my first pick, this is one that they've been talking about for a couple of months now, coming from Joe Hill. It's called Dying is Easy. He's teamed up with Mark Simmons on this one, so the artwork should be amazing. But this one is about a disgraced ex-cop turned stand-up comedian. And on his little beat, there's a guy who's another comedian, but he got there the dirty way, like stealing jokes and stealing from people. And, they say for him to have a lot of enemies is nothing. So when someone comes to Sid and wants to take out this guy, he's like, maybe. So it should be pretty good. A little mystery here for us. Now, when I first heard about this, they said it was going to be a 5-part series, a little mini series for us. But I've also saw somewhere that it may be 6. I don't know if maybe they've counted an extra cover in, or maybe he's extended the story out to one more issue to finish telling it. So, like I said, most of his stories, of course, are amazing. I don't see this one being any different. Like I said, he's been working on this one for a while. He's been talking about it for quite a while. So it's nice to finally see it come out where we can read it instead of hear about it.
Yeah, this was on my radar, so
Yep.
I'm definitely interested.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this hit us all.
Yep. He tells a good story. I mean, he reminds me of his dad so much, and he probably hates to be compared to him a lot.
You'd think that because he changed his name, but yeah.
Right, but you can definitely tell that his dad has influenced him. completely, and the talent was passed on. So if I was him, I would take it as a compliment. But I'm not him, so.
Right.
Alrighty, Mike.
I'm up again already, huh? Okay, so my second pick is from Boom Studios, and I am picking Red Mother, #1. This is an interesting little story. So Daisy lost her eye and the man she loves in a mugging not long ago, and so now she is trying to move on, essentially. And the new prosthetic eye that she's been given is not working the way you would think something like that would work. And so this is a bit of a darker story. This is brought to us by the team of Jeremy Hahn, who is probably most recently known for his work on The Beauty, and Danny Luckert was the artist for Regression. So some fun, some cool talent going on here in this one. So I'm looking forward to this.
That one does sound good.
A dark story pick from Mike.
Shocking, right?
This was on my radar too, so yeah. I mean, I can't say too much negative because it definitely caught my attention. So yeah.
Hear, hear.
Okay, for my second choice, I am going with a omnibus from DC Comics, and this chronicles the entire story of Y the Last Man. It kind of blew me when I found out that this actually has all 60 issues, the entire run, in one omnibus form. And if you're not familiar with this story, it's the story of a man named Yorick and his pet monkey, Ampersand, who are the only survivors of a plague that wiped out every male mammal on the planet. And this story has been bandied about of some kind of form of live action adaptation, whether it's a series or a movie. It's going to happen one of these days. This story is too good not to see a live action version of it. It's $150, but it's all 60 issues, 1,440 pages. It's worth shelling out if you've been interested. It just, there you go, get it. It's worth it.
What he said.
Yep.
And if they bring this, I hope they do it in a chapter form, a series of movies, so they get the entire feel of the entire run, rather than just a small portion and say, well, that's it, we're done.
Honestly, I still think it should be a series. I think that's the only way to tell. If they're wanting to tell the story and they want to tell it correctly, it doesn't have to be word for word, image by image, but if they want to tell the story right, it has to be a series.
Mm-hmm.
To do it justice.
So it's not rushed.
Right. So, but that's just me. All right, Les.
From my second choice comes The Dark Knight Returns, The Golden Child, #1. From DC Comics, once again, Frank Miller steps up, tells a story that is in his timeline 3 years since the events of Dark Knight 3, The Master Race, which is one that you need to read because it is phenomenal. But in this one, you have two of the characters, Lara and Carrie Kelly, who have to cope with their new roles in Gotham City. But in Gotham, an evil has returned, and Lara and Carrie must team up to stop the growing threat. The golden child is young Jonathan Kent, who has a power unlike anything the world has ever seen. So this is the start of a multi-issue series. I got a feeling this is going to rank there with the other titles that Miller has done. I'm looking forward to this big time.
That does sound good.
Frank Miller writing Batman again? Whatever.
Yeah.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Sounds
Should
good.
be interesting. You know?
It should.
Alrighty, Liz.
All right. For my second pick this week, I'm bringing you guys another Christmas title. Yay!
Oh boy.
This one, yay! This one is called Scary Christmas. It's out of American mythology. This, I believe, will be a one-shot. I'm not for sure on that one, but the way it's reading, it is. It's going to have 3 stories in it, and they're traveling the world, and I am so glad they didn't jump to Germany for Krampus. As much as I love a good Krampus story, there's other mythologies out there that surround Christmas. So this one will actually touch on that. They're going to take us to the Alpines for Frau Puchat, which he disembowels people. And then we'll skip over to France, where we meet Hans Trapp, which is a cannibal that disguises himself as a scarecrow. And then we'll go to Iceland. I don't know if I can pronounce this. Lucatorian, which is the Yule cat, which devours you whole. So, who's been naughty? Should be pretty good. I do want to throw that out that they have put a very strong disclaimer on here for the gore, the violence. There'll be some nudity in there. You know, all the good stuff for good reading. It's not the Christmas story you want to bring home to your kid. So, like I said, this one, I'm really excited about it. I always love learning about the different lores out there, especially something different than the little shiny red man that comes down your chimney. So, should be good. Yeah. Murder, mayhem, and monsters. It's the 3 M's.
It ain't the fat guy in the red suit, that's for sure.
Nope.
That's all right.
Sounds like some of them would eat him.
Alrighty, and our honorable mention this week is...
Okay, so our honorable mention this week is from Dynamite Entertainment. And they're starting a new series starring Deja Thoris. And honestly, this is basically just a continuation of the last couple, but I think they've been doing a really good job with her establishing kind of her as a strong central character. For example, in this one, they're planning to, or based on what I'm reading here, they're planning to focus on her as a scientist rather than all the other stuff that she's kind of already done. So she's been a wife and a mother, and she's obviously a princess. But she's actually, her goal here is, as a scientist, to solve her world's major problem, which is the fact that their atmosphere is going away and they're running out of water, and the temperature's dropping. And it doesn't hurt that this is written by Dan Abnett either. So I'm looking forward to taking a look at this.
Sounds good, definitely.
I'm there with you.
Yeah, Dan Abnett. But man, he
can write a story.
He can write a story.
Should be good.
All right. Any special shout-outs or mentions this week?
Not me.
Nothing here.
No.
Okay, we'll just move on to our regular shout-outs. First, want to thank Pop Goes the Culture for allowing us to be a part of their podcast network. Such a great group of fellow podcasts. We definitely recommend that you check them out. There will be a link in the show notes. We also would advise you to check out our fellow podcasters that make up Podern Family on Twitter. And the best way to do that is to go to Twitter and do a search, #PodernFamily, and just scroll through, and whatever catches your attention, click on the link, download the episode, and knock yourselves out. You'll have a good time. Thank you guys for your support as always in sharing our links. I want to also thank Manny the Martyr for supplying the music to our podcast. Definitely go check out their music. We'll have a link in our show notes to their couple of EPs. And finally, you, dear listener, thank you for downloading and listening to today's episode. We appreciate your support as always. We'd love to hear from you. Any kind of feedback you have, comment, question, complaint, suggestion, observation, whatever, please contact us. Let us know. We want to hear from you. And there are several ways you can do that. Our email address is email@thefellowshipofthegeeks.net, or you can go to our website and go to the About Us page, and there's a contact form that you can fill out. Please follow us on social media. I've already mentioned our Facebook page, The Fellowship of the Geeks, so feel free to follow us there. And if you plan to go to our monthly meetups, there's already a Facebook event for December. So just definitely check that out and let us know if you're interested or if you're going. We would love to have you. Love to see you there. And we're obviously on Twitter @Fellowship Geeks. By all means, follow us there. If you like to follow our personal Twitter accounts, you can do that too. Mike can be found @MikeyGeek. Liz can be found @LN_geek. And I can be found @TomTCGeek. And wherever you download our episodes from, if you take a couple moments to please rate and review us, it would be greatly appreciated. Any final thoughts before we say goodbye?
Just thanks, everybody.
Yep. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks for listening.
We appreciate you listening. We definitely appreciate your support. And until next time, geek on, my friends.
We thank you for listening to the show. Comments, suggestions, and questions can be sent to email@thefellowshipofthegeeks.net. You can follow us on Facebook @The Fellowship of the Geeks and on Twitter @Fellowship Geeks. Until next time,